Okay, welcome, welcome. We're so glad to see some of you here live. Welcome, welcome. We're glad to have you. And a lot of you will be watching this after the fact, and we're glad that you are. I'm Sybil, owner of Teachers Need Teachers, school and digital magazine, and author of Burn Bright Not Out. And I'm so thrilled to have Amber Schmidt here with us, talking all about restorative practices. I'll let you, Amber, go ahead and introduce yourself and then you can get started. Yeah.
Yeah, perfect. Thanks, Sybil. I appreciate that. And thanks again, everyone, for being on the call, and also appreciate everyone that's going to watch this later on the recording. Yeah, like Sybil said, my name's Amber Schmidt. I'm currently a consultant that works with a company called Pathways to Inclusive Education, owned by Kim Bain. If anybody's ever worked with her before, she's an amazing person. I do have my email and LinkedIn profile on here if you want to connect after for any questions. And then, of course, the information that I'm going to present tonight is all about trauma-informed care through the lens of restorative practices. I am going to present this same session. It is a little bit longer, about an hour, at Senia Unplugged Inclusive Insights, November 22nd to the 24th. It's their virtual weekend workshop. So if you want to be able to sign up for that and jump in and see amazing professionals around the world sharing awesome content, feel free to do it. Or of course, in March, you could go in person in Cambodia. So lots of options there. I do want to give credit to the people. All the content comes from the International Institutes of Restorative Practices, IRP. So it's none of my content. Don't make this up. Got trained in it and love it, but definitely sharing their content. Also, I worked with two different school districts in Kentucky, Jefferson County Public Schools and Kenton County School Districts, and just want to make sure I give credit to them as well. So I am going to drop the slide deck that we are going to be viewing. I'm going to put it in the chat so that you can have access to it and be able to dig into it a little bit deeper later if you need to. And then we will jump right in. All right, so who are you? Since we are such a small group, you can feel free to unmute and just introduce yourself. You can share whatever you want, but on the slide deck, I just put if you want to share your name, school, organization you work for, title of your job position, and then just an interest of listing what time it is where you're located. So you can either pop it into the chat if you feel more comfortable with that, or you can just unmute and share. So either way, all good. All right. 5:30 a.m. Oh my
Oh, wow.
goodness.
Thank you for being
Wow.
here.
That's amazing. Yes, I love that. I love all of your titles too. That is amazing. Author, trainer, public speaker, practitioner. So good. Okay, you specialize in empowering individuals of all ages, students, teachers, parents, leaders, to unlock their full potential. You're at 3 self-help books. Wow, that is so amazing. Helping young people self-reflect, connect, inspire, grow, and transform together. Thank you for that. It's super comprehensive and welcome. All right, and then we got educational consultant. And it's 7 p.m. Okay, so there we go. Fellow Eastern Standard Time person. So I love that. All right, and then founder of Mind, M-I-N-D, Moments and Community. Okay, yeah, thank you. Appreciate that. Thank you for those introductions and welcome. All right, so just grounding us in the space, love my grounding activities, tons of ways to do different breathing exercises. We're just going to do some box breathing just to get us started and grounded here. So we're just going to inhale for 4, hold for 4, exhale for 4, hold for 4. All right, and we'll just have done one round of that. Just because I know everyone's mind gets pulled a million different ways. You're either thinking about your evening activities, you're thinking about your workday activities, whatever it is. Maybe you're listening to this later and you're jogging, running, talking to a friend in a cafe. So just love to get people grounded into the space and time. All right, we do have some workshop activities, objectives here. There are actually 8 practices of restorative practices, but of course, just during this 30-minute session, we're only going to talk about 4 of them. pretty high level overview. So if this is an intro to you to restorative practices, it will give you an idea of what it is. If you're very familiar with it, maybe you'll take a new aha moment from it. Number 2, you can reflect on your own personal and professional restorative practices. And number 3, you will be able to walk away from this session with an action plan on how to integrate restorative practices into my job. And I know sometimes when you hear the word action plan, people freak out and they're like, what, a multi-year action plan? No, this is going to be a super simple question. I think you're going to love it, especially just getting the content in this short amount of time. All right, so trauma-informed care through the lens of restorative practices. The definition that comes out from International Institute for Restorative Practices, IRP, they define it as a social science that studies how to build social capital and achieve social discipline through participatory learning and decision-making. And then the use of restorative practices helps in all these different areas, many more, but it really does help to reduce crime, violence, bullying, discipline referrals, improve human behavior, strengthen civil society, provide effective leadership, restore relationships, and repair the harm. So out of those uses of restorative practices, I don't have this on the slide, but just impromptu, let's get in the chat. What is the one use of restorative practices that you're looking for to be able to use the most after this session? It can be one of the bullet points listed. It can be something else that you've thought of. But in what way are you looking for restorative practices to help you either in your personal or in your professional life? Let's get that in the chat. All right. Yep. Looking to restore those relationships. Love that. Thank you. Achieving social discipline by educating children. Absolutely. It's a great goal for restorative practices. Okay, so the basic premise of restorative practices is the first thing makes everybody happier, right? Everyone loves that idea. So that's why I love restorative practices, because it's not mumbo jumbo. It's not, hey, let's create the wheel, or it's called something else and we're going to repackage it after, 10 years when someone forgets about it. No, it's like legit. It's just literally, how can we be better humans? We can be more cooperative and productive. We really like to talk about the more likely about making positive changes in their behavior. When those people that are in authority do things with people rather than to you or for you. So you can think about that in your own life when you've had people in positions of authority. Maybe it's your boss, your supervisor, maybe it's been a parent, a guardian, teachers, whoever it is. If people do things with you, that's where the power is. If people do things to you or for you, that is not helping you to be a happier, more cooperative, more productive human being. So that's really what this is all about. And we'll kind of break this down a little bit further as we go into it. But really the whole purpose, again, is about developing community and managing conflict and tensions through repairing harm and restoring relationships. But it really is the 80-20 rule is you're trying to do 80% of these things proactive by building relationships, community, establishing relationships. And then the 20% is what's responsive, that you're taking responsibility, you might be repairing harm, you're restoring relationships. But you really want 80% of the time to be about being proactive. So here are the 8 practices of restorative practices. And you'll see the things in blue are proactive. When it's green, it can be considered proactive or responsive. And when it's red, it's responsive. So again, 80% of the time, you're really trying to stay in the blue. 20% of the time, you would be staying in the red. So we have the social discipline window, restorative language, fair process, shame, guilt, and empathy, restorative questions, restorative conversations, restorative formal conference, and restorative circles. Yes, of course, take all the screenshots you want. Also too, yeah, if you ever want to refer back to it, and I see somebody else popped in, so I'm going to make sure that I get the slide deck back into the chat too. And then you can be able to jump back into the slide deck too that we're viewing. So again, what we're going to hone in on tonight, or today or this morning, whatever time it is for you, we're going to talk about the social discipline window, restorative language, restorative questions, and restorative conversations. So we're going to kind of stay in that area. So social discipline window, you've probably seen this before, especially if you've seen Sybil's amazing post promoting the session today. She was really talking about the social discipline window. And again, what we said, the basic premise is to do things with people, not to them, not for them, and just not at all. So when you're looking at this, you're looking at on the left-hand side, you're going to see something that's in control, low to high, meaning your limit setting, there's a lot of discipline. And then on the bottom part, it's low to high, but it's about support, encouragement, and nurturing. So if you are very high in discipline, but low in support, then that means it's punitive to the student, to your colleague, to your boss, whoever it is. If you are doing something that is really low in limit setting, low in support, it's just neglectful. It's just for naught. And then if it is considered high, still supportive, encouraging, but just no limit setting again, then that's permissive and you're doing it for them. And then where you want to stay is in the orange box with, we're doing things with people, restorative, high, limit setting, discipline, restorative. But again, it's really high in encouragement and nurturing. And kind of what I liked about Sybil's post is she was asking basically, what box are you in? You know, what box are you functioning in as a person, not only professionally and whatever your job is, but also personally. How are your personal relationships affected by it too? And that's another reason why I love restorative practices, because it's not just about the school setting or being an educator. It's about being a human and doing this in any setting that you're involved in. The purposes of the social discipline window, again, it describes the 4 basic approaches to maintaining social norms and behavior boundaries. Again, I just talked about the broad applications it has. And then the biggest thing is it reintegrates the wrongdoers back into the community and reduces the likelihood of the offense or reoccurrence. So again, it's separating the deed from the doer. And that's the large concept behind restorative practices. Here's another way to look at it that's a little bit more specific about if you're authoritarian and being punitive, then students are going to be feeling like threats might be happening, their memory goes down, they can't concentrate. Their brain state is called anxious vigilance. And no one wants this people in the classroom like that. If you are like, oh my gosh, what is going to happen to me next? That is definitely not going to help you to learn. If you are in the whole neglectful, uninvolved approach, you're doing nothing with students, then they feel reactive defensive because then they're distressed, they're neglected, they don't know what's happening, they don't feel good, they're not a part of the community. And then if it's the permissive approach where you're doing things for them and you're just excusing the behavior or whatever it is, then it's just passive enabled. They're like, yeah, sure, fine, whatever, and you've seen that in your classrooms, I'm sure in your organizations, people you worked with before. But what you want it to be is that restorative, you're doing things with them. So that builds that connection, it builds the trust, it builds the community, it's reflective. All right, so jumping into the next concept about restorative language. So this is language that is intentionally used to build positive relationships and promote understanding. Imagine that. I honestly just feel like if everyone used restorative language all day long, everywhere, what a happy place we would live and work in. And I want to make the connection back to this. Restorative language is being in the with box. So when you start to see things in your day, you can start to categorize that. Was that in the with box? Was it in the to box? Was it in the not box? What is it in the for box? And it's just a good reflection for you to have through your day to be able to understand what your behavior is or what your words are communicating to others. So there's 3 parts of restorative language. There's actually restorative conversation or communication. There's the questions that we're going to talk about, and there's the affective language. So 3 parts to restorative language. We're going to jump into the affective statements. So for an affective statements, there's actually 4 parts of it. The first part is observation. Then there's a feeling, a need, and a request. So the observations are, what are we observing that others either saying or doing? What are people doing that we either like or don't like? There's no evaluation or judging. It's just starting out with when I see. And I'll give you examples of how this looks. The next one's feeling. So you would say the I feel statements. How do you feel when you observe the action? Were you hurt, scared, sad, amused, whatever it is? And then the need. What needs of ours are connected to the feeling identified? Because I need. And then you make a request, and it has to be a very specific request. You just don't want to be like, oh, I need you to be a better person. I need you to be kind, because people don't have a concept of what that means. So you have to be very specific. I need you to have eyes on the speaker. I need you to be able to use words that are going to build me up as a person, or just whatever it is. And then, of course, let's not be that crazy, because if there is a safety issue, your request does become a directive. So if you have, specifically in the education setting, let's say you have a student that's doing something, or you have a colleague that's doing something that's unsafe, you would just tell them like, hey, that's not a safe behavior. You don't have to be like, when I observe you standing on the table, I feel really angry, so I need you to get down. It doesn't have to be like that. So don't take it out of context for what it is. Here's some examples. So it can be negative, so it's specific to students. So it says, when I see paper balls thrown in the room, that's the observation, I get really frustrated because I need this classroom to be safe and respectful for everyone. Please put the paper balls in the trash. Now, the thing about this is the power of the observation. If you're in this moment, this is obviously going to really irritate you. And whatever it is, whatever behavior might irritate you, the power of the observation is it gives you that natural time to pause and be able to self-regulate your own emotions, because you're going to have to think. So instead of just jumping into when I feel, you are taking time to observe either the behavior, the situation, what they're saying. So it gives you that time to kind of take your in deep breaths, box breathing like we did in the beginning, or whatever it is, to be able to chill before you're going to start to speak to somebody. And then again, it can be positive. So when I see you raising your hands, I'm so happy because I need us all to be following the expectations, and you are. Keep up the good work. So what I would say about affective statements is, even though you think they're very easy, because you're like, yeah, of course, I do that all the time. But you really got to think about, do they have all four parts? That's what's really hard. Do they have the observation? Do they have the feeling? Do they have the need? And do they have the very specific request? So just think about it as you go about your day today. You get to effective statements all day long with a ton of people that you interact with. It can be colleagues, it can be your supervisor, it can be students, whatever it is. Think about, did you use all four parts of the effective statement? And that can be a takeaway that you do right today. So practice time. You are going to actually come up with an affective statement that you can get into the chat, that you want it to have all four parts. So you can choose one of the scenarios and come up with your affective statement. So you'll make sure it has the observation, the feeling, the need, and the request. So we'll see scenario 1. You can interpret what that means. Scenario 2, 3, and 4. So you're only going to choose one, and then I'll give you about 30 seconds to a minute here. Get my clock out to come up with your affective statement. And when you got your affective statement, you can get it in the chat. And everyone, if you get your scenario in your mind, I can go back to the affective statement so you can feel like you can have those starters there for you. Yes, I love that. Thank you for that. Yep. Good framework. We got, can visualize it, used it unknowingly. Yes, we'll start using it with more awareness. Absolutely. And that's what a lot of this is about. It is not like anything rocket science information. It's putting names to things. It's visualizing things. So yeah, let's get your affective statements in the chat here for the scenarios. They don't have to be super complicated, so don't overthink it, especially if it's 5:30 a.m. All right, so we got, when I see you running in the hall, I feel scared that you'll slip. I need you to walk. Yeah, perfect. Yes, I observe you sleeping. I feel sorry for you. I need to observe why this happened. Not sleep in our classroom. Request you get back to me with this, back to me on this with a weekly plan tomorrow. Yeah, so you're giving them some think time. You're letting them know that the information that you have noticed what's going on with them, and you want to be able to get back to them. I love that. All right, keep getting them in the chat if you haven't already, but we're going to jump into restorative questions. Okay, restorative questions. I'm going to show you the questions here in a minute. But first, I'm going to explain the purpose is restorative questions, they're open-ended because they help to bring emotion and get the emotions in the room. Again, they create that psychological space to allow individuals room to explore issues in a non-threatening way, so they're not in trouble. Because I feel like a lot of times what happens when people ask restorative questions, they're like, oh my gosh, am I in trouble? And it's like, that is not about this. This is not a discipline situation. This is a restorative situation. Now, it can be used with discipline and discipline situations that happen, and I'll talk about that in a little bit. But again, it's really in a non-threatening way. You can address issues from past, present, future, doesn't matter. You are going to explore the harm and its impact on others. It really helps people to have reflection, the sense of safety and belonging. Again, it allows for open communication, positive culture, and allows for each voice to be heard. And that's one of the biggest things ever, because when we feel heard, we feel valued, and we feel like a good human being. So here are the restorative practices questions. And again, this is in the with box that you're doing this. So these are the questions that you can actually ask students, colleagues, supervisor, whoever it is. If you're going to respond to the challenging behavior, you can ask, what happened? What were you thinking at the time? What have you thought about since? Who's been affected by what you've done? In what way have they been affected? What did you think you need to do to make things right? And then on the right-hand side, this is to help those that have been harmed by others' actions. You're going to ask them, what did you think when you realized what had happened? What impact has this incident had on you and others? What has been the hardest thing for you? And what do you think needs to happen to make things right? So again, it's responding to challenging behavior, or if someone's been affected or harmed by somebody, then you're asking them these questions. And I put the slide deck in the chat because you can click on the hyperlink here. It will take you out to the International Institute of Restorative Practices, and you will be able to read an article that a teacher wrote about specifically how they use this in the classroom. But the practical application and the purpose, again, is that you're going to use it when you need to respond to a concern that a student has or you have with them. So either way, it can be used both ways. And then really the whole most important point about questions is it avoids asking why, because why always indicates judgment. So you're not asking them, why did you act this way? Or why did you do this? You are going to be asking them what happened. What might you do next time? Because it leads, if you ask why someone does something, just think about when someone asks you why. Already, it's going to lead to them being defensive. They're not going to be reflective. They're not going to feel safe. They're going to be feeling threatened. So that is why we do not ask why. Jumping into the restorative conversations. The conversations are where you're using the questions. So the questions we just went over, you're actually having a conversation about it. But again, it gives the student the opportunity to explain what happened from their perspective, identify who was harmed and how, as well as what do they need to do to make things right? What do they need to do to make things amend? And the thing that I was just talking about before is restorative conversations can be used with every level of an offense to the code of conduct or student handbook. So whatever it is, anytime there's discipline, you can still use restorative conversations. It's not like you throw discipline out the window, but it's also not like you just use restorative conversations. They can go hand in hand. And that's a lot of times what people don't like about restorative practices, because they're like, oh, it's just mushy kumbaya stuff and no one ever gets their discipline. It's like, okay, that is not it at all. We're talking about restoring and treating somebody with dignity and respect, which we all hope that we get out of life. And that's how to do it. So the logistics of how this works in the real world, because we live in a real world. So what people put on screen and say, hey, have these conversations. It's like, okay, and what time of day do you have? Because I don't have that my time of day. But here is a real world example. So what you want to try to do is you want to process this as closely as to the time that the behavior happens. Because if it's like days and days and days later, especially if you're talking with younger students or younger people, they're going to have no concept of what happened 4 days ago. Again, these questions are not asked of students when they're together, rather they're individual conversations. If desired, you can have them together for a more formal conference or conversation, but that kind of comes down the road in training. You'd have to have very, very specific training to do it, because then you're talking about bringing a potential like perpetrator and victim together, or bullying and target together. So that is like a whole separate thing that we're not even talking about today. So these are just more individual conversations you're having. And again, they can be asked quietly one-to-one with a student, maybe during independent work time, a transition to another class or activity, in the hallway, see them at lunch, recess, whatever that looks like for you. So again, here's an example of it. A teacher might notice a student is significantly quieter in class than usual and isn't interacting with other students. So the teacher might have an informal conference using affective language and ask, I feel worried because you don't seem to be acting the way you usually do. Is there anything I can do to help you feel more like yourself? I'm always happy to listen to you if you need to talk. So that's like super clear. That's it. That's all you're trying to do. And again, if the students wants to carry the conversation forward, then they can. But that is all. It's not this like crazy thing of like, must have restorative conversations. We must get into this like Zen moment and like have it. It's just like, no, let's be a good person and just have a good conversation after, and make sure people feel good and understand that you really are valuing them as a person. So getting to that action plan, this is it. This is it in these 30 minutes of time. What is the one restorative practices you want to try to use this school year, and why? What will it look like, sound like, feel like in your classroom or your school or your work setting, your organization, personal life? So I know that's a ton of questions and I don't want to go too much past our time. So maybe just pop in the chat, out of the 4 that we talked about, the social discipline window, restorative language, restorative questions, restorative conversations, let's just get in the chat. What is the one that you want to be able to use this school year? And just pop that in the chat. Which one is resonating with you? Yeah, restorative language, using restorative language in question 1-to-1, restorative questions will be helpful. Yeah, love it. Love the takeaways everybody's having. Thank you for getting that in the chat. Okay, so we have come to the end of our time. I am here if people have some questions and I can answer them. Or I just put kind of some discussion questions up there too, if people wanted to talk about it, just what resonated with you so far. Do you believe restorative practices will work within your school setting or work setting? Why or why not? And then what potential barriers or solutions do you think would need to be discussed before restorative practices could be implemented in your school or your work setting? So I just put some things up there for some discussions, but I know that we're coming down to our time. So I really just appreciate everyone joining in the session. Again, for Sybil hosting such an amazing space for us all to come together. Hopefully it was informative. So if you want to hang on and ask questions, if you want to unmute or put them in the chat, that's great. If you want to peace out and get ready for your day or jumping into your evening, that's fine too. So I'll hang out here, but just you can end the call whenever you need to. If you have questions, just get them in the chat or unmute and ask. And thanks again, Sybil, and everybody for your time.
Thank you, Amber. That was so amazing. It was so clear and such helpful, great information. I love the 4 parts of the affective statement, because you often do see, or in myself or in other teachers that I'm coaching, one part missing. And that makes such a big difference. And it's often that observation. And then also just learning to pause is huge. So I love that gives you that observation, gives you that opportunity to pause, state it, and then move forward. So thank you. It's been amazing.
Yeah, absolutely. Thanks, Sybil. All right, we
Yeah.
got a hand raised. Yeah, feel free to unmute, ask your question.
Yeah, hi, Ember. Very beautiful session. I really enjoyed, and I have a question. Uh, the practice is amazing, but you also highlighted about solving the challenges proactively, right? 80% of it works that way. What are some signs, being an educator, that we should be aware to identify certain things proactively instead of going and reacting for it?
Absolutely. So I think anytime that you can observe students' behavior or listen to them, so the examples we gave, if you see a student sleeping in class, if you see their behavior changing dramatically, they're no longer hanging around their friends, or their grades are dropping, or, if it's a colleague of yours, maybe they're acting totally different or just, off, however you want to say that. That's those proactive ways. If you're observing their behavior, if you're observing their language, their feelings, whatever it is that they're showing you that something is going on in their life, that's a proactive way to be able to step in to have that restorative conversation. I don't think we have any more in there.
No.
Appreciate everybody. Thank you for your attention and time. Thanks again, Sybil, for hosting us.
Thank you so much, Amber. Really appreciate it. And thank you everyone who was able to make it live and watching this later. Your time is much appreciated. And we hope it's helpful. And I know I'm taking away a lot, so we'll see you next time. Thank you, everybody.
Thanks. Bye.
Bye.